Hi, my name's Dayle Adams of Planning Ahead of Time, and on this week's Pat Chat, I'm speaking to Kasia, who is a grief educator. Hi, Kasia, would you like to give us some information about you?
Absolutely. Hi there. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kasia, and as Dale said, I'm a grief educator. And mainly in my work, I support companies to become more grief friendly. And I so look forward to speaking about it today with you, Dale.
Yes, and I think it's very, very essential, isn't it, that companies treat their employees in a way to help them through their grief. And that's what you do, is that right? You educate them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I just encourage companies to introduce grief support into their well-being culture, into their well-being policies, because we spend a lot of amount in our workplaces and in our culture, we very often are not allowed to take a lot of days off. Not to process our grief, but just to be with our emotions and to do everything we need to do after someone loved one died. And there are so many factors influencing grief. And one of them is, of course, how we are supported by our environment, also our professional environment. So if we know how to support employees who are going through this profound experience of losing a loved one, we will make a difference in terms of how they feel about the grief, how they go through it.
I absolutely agree with you. And I love the fact that you used the word culture because I do think it's cultural. And you've said earlier to me before we started the recording that it's not really about HR and the fact that of the laws, it is about the culture.
Absolutely. So in the UK, for example, there is no such a law that tells us how many days an employer should offer to a grieving employee. It's up to an organization to decide how to form the bereavement policies. So if they think that 3 days, the standard at the moment in the UK is between 3 and 5 days off when someone experiences a bereavement, but they think it's not enough, and it's of course not enough, as you know, they can offer that and they can offer more than that.
Yeah. I, I don't think it is enough. And when my mum died, my brother in Germany got 2 days. And it's like, that's the death of his mum, 2 days. And in that time, he obviously had to fly back. So the funeral and everything had to be arranged around his flights back and enabling him to actually come back for the service for his mom and to spend some time with the family before going back out. And that was it. He was, back to work. And I just think it's not enough. The UK, as you say, it's a little bit longer, but it still isn't enough when somebody loses somebody and it causes such a massive impact on their life. Everything changes literally overnight, even with if that death was expected. It does feel that more is needed from companies.
Absolutely. And in the UK, we have such a diverse, like we have people from all over the world. So it's also important for the companies to be aware that even 3 or 5 days off is not enough. Very people, as you said, have to go abroad to attend a funeral. So enabling them to be with the families when a death occurs, it's such an important thing. And many employees will remember how their colleagues and how their employer behaved in such important circumstances.
Yeah, that again, absolutely right, because it changes your view, I suppose, on your employer through that time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing is that our working environment is not very, you know, grief friendly because in our works, we are required to always perform, to deliver successes, to perform. And there is no room for being vulnerable, fragile, sad, angry, tired, less concentrated. And sorry, I just wanted to say that there is no room. We don't give ourselves permission to grieve, to spend some time on looking at our emotions, adjusting to the life we have to live without our loved one, and bearing in mind that we normally lead a very hectic professional lives doesn't help with that. So if we have people around us who know how to support us, who know how what it means to grieve, actually, how grief influences our cognitive behavior, because when we grieve, when we experience bereavement, very often we cannot concentrate, we cannot think on very high abstract levels, we are very tired, we have so many changes in our behavior. And if we know that we work with people who understand that and with people who give us permission to grieve basically, and not to hide what we are going through, it will definitely have an impact, not only, yeah, as I said before, not only on the way on how we are going to grieve, but on the way we are going to perform. And at work, we have to perform because we are employed to perform. It's not only about, being surrounded by people who support us, it's also to perform, to show that we can do our work. And very often when we lose control and when we lose someone we love, when we face death and bereavement, we very often lose control. So we, in our lives, we need some points of control, and workplace is one of them. So if we are faced with support and understanding, it can have a massive, massive impact on both sides, the grieving employee and also the workplace, the employer.
And I think when you actually, do have to face the death of somebody very close to you, it's not always just about the funeral and the few days after it, but there's often a lot of admin that comes, family discussions, conversations. There is a lot to be organised when somebody dies. That's running up to the funeral and beyond that. And I think, again, it's having some understanding of time that people might need to go away from the office to actually deal with some of the administrative tasks, really.
Absolutely. There are so many decisions you need to also make when someone dies. And some offices are only open between Monday to Friday, and we normally at work between Monday and Friday. They always say when someone you work with experiences bereavement, allow them to have their phones at their desk. There are some companies that have like phones policies, calls. You have to be in contact. Many important things going on behind the scenes, and you as a colleague or employer may not even realize what is going on with your employee. And there are so many things that has to be sorted out even months or even years after someone experienced bereavement. So it's also about this awareness and understanding that the bereavement support doesn't stop, I don't know, 1 week or 1 month after an employee experienced bereavement. It can carry on as long as we live, as long as we will love this person. So being aware that there might be also some important days or more difficult days, such as anniversaries, Christmases, I don't know, Mother's Days, Father's Days. It's also very essential to be aware of the small, anniversaries and important dates, which can have an impact on how an employee will perform and will feel.
Yeah, well, you actually came to this line of work through your own bereavement, didn't you?
Yes, I did. My father died 5 years ago, and the way my employer and my colleagues behaved towards me was extraordinary. And I'm here because of the fact that I was treated really, really, really well. So I'm originally from Poland, and I had to travel to Poland and had to take a plane to attend my father's funeral. And my previous company's bereavement policy was really, really generous. And so people who had to travel abroad to attend their funeral were even granted 10 days off, fully paid. And I remember reflecting on it because I was at home with my family and I didn't have to worry about my financial situation because I knew that my bereavement didn't have any impact on my finances because I was fully covered. And at the same time, my brother was self-employed, and he also took some time off. And at the same time, he didn't have any financial security. So I had those days off, and my brother didn't. He also made me think on the discrepancies between what is offered to different types of employees.
No. So you were based in the UK, you're not now, but actually you work mainly with UK companies, is that right?
Yes. I work with, mainly, yes, as you said, with UK companies and also with Polish companies. And I have to say that in the UK, there are some differences between how Poland and UK manage bereavement culture. In the UK, for example, it's a standard that companies have a bereavement policies.
Yes.
In Poland, it's not like that. I speak to so many companies and charities, and they hear for the first time through our conversations that there might be a document created by a company that shows how to treat a bereaved employee. So although there are still many things to do, we can do to improve how employees are treated, I think in the UK we did a really, really good job, because the awareness of having a bereavement policy and in the importance of having a bereavement policy in place, it's very, very high.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think with what you do, it's so important. Death education generally is so important. Having these conversations, talking about death, dying, loss, grief, it just makes it so much easier for people when they know that they can talk about it, that they've got somebody who's supporting them. And as you say, we spend so much of our lives working, that to have the support of a company, the company that you're working for, knowing that you've got the time that you need, or that they are going to be able to help you when you're at work and you're going through vulnerable moments. I mean, that is huge for anybody. It would make such a big impact, and like for you, a really positive impact on grief, because there's so much going on at that time in your life, that you need that support. So
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that companies need to do a lot for their grieving employees, because it's not that it's their responsibility to take this pain away. It's more about, as I said before we pressed recording, it's more about those small acts of kindness, like making a cup of tea, asking how you're doing, or even saying you don't have to do it right all the time. It's just about a permission and acknowledgement that something huge is going on in the life of my employee, of my colleague. And I think it will make such a difference. And in the majority of the cases, it will be enough.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to speak to you, I believe you do one-to-ones and you do sort of day training, a lot of it's online. How do you work with people?
Yes, bearing in mind, as we already mentioned, I'm not based in the UK anymore. I lived in the UK for 8 years until 2022. But now I mainly work online. So people definitely can contact me through my Instagram account, my LinkedIn account, and I also have a website. Unfortunately, my name, it's very complicated. It's not Kasia. Everyone calls me Kasia because it's just easier. But my full name is Katarzyna, and my website is Katarzyna Borowczak, as well as my Instagram account and my LinkedIn profile. So maybe after we have recorded this talk, we can include this information in the description of this fact chat. It will be easier for our listeners.
Not a problem at all. I will put the details at the end, and it also goes into the write-up on the social, so people will be able to get hold of you. But how do you work? So you do, like you say, you can do one-to-one sessions, but you can also work with teams, can you? And how do you do that element?
Yeah, so I run one-to-one consultations. So if a company experiences a bereavement, if they don't know how to support their bereaved colleague, they can have a one-to-one session with me just to discuss their particular situation, and we can explore together how they can provide this support. I also run workshops and webinars on introduction to grief education. I introduce the topic of grief in the workplace. We talk about how grief can affect a grieving employee, and we talk about how to create a good and supporting bereavement policy. And I offer a space to exchanging some experiences, because when you know that there is a safe space to talk about grief and bereavement, there's so many stories, and people feel that they can use this space to share their stories, experiences, and reflections, because very often they don't have such a space. So I offer it for my services.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And that's actually how I first got to know of you, is I watched you do a presentation and thought it was great, and that I wanted to actually talk with you on a pat chat. So approached you to come on. Though again, I know that you can do those presentations and the webinars and share your knowledge and information. So I think that's lovely. Hopefully people will get in touch with you. We'll put the details at the end. But thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much, Dayle. It's been a pleasure.
Speak to you again soon.